Godzilla, November 3rd, 1954. 70 years. Need I say more? To celebrate Godzilla's 70th anniversary, OmniViewer has gathered us once again to commemorate moments from the Kaiju Eiga. I am the Linkzilla. Join me as I celebrate Godzilla's birthday and commemorate the past 70 years of the King in one monstrous moment. With the release of Godzilla -1 last year, something occurred that hadn't happened for decades. Godzilla was popular in the West. Godzilla has been in the public eye during the last decade thanks to Legendary's Monsterverse. However, outside of the loyal fan base, the general public viewed these movies more as novelties, not appreciating the sheer effort that it took to make these films possible. -1 changed all of that. Not only has Godzilla's popularity skyrocketed, but arguably, it was the first time in decades that American audiences were introduced to Godzilla in his original function. Breaking free of the stigma of the campy, silly, man-in-a-monster-suit cheese fest of the later Showa-era films. Now the West has the chance to see Godzilla for what he truly intended to be, and the demand for Godzilla was so high after -1 that it arguably became one of the most successful films of 2023. What was meant to be one weekend became 1 week, what was meant to be 1 week became 2 weeks became a month, and 1 month became 2. The film's box office numbers absolutely crushed the competition, showing that audiences were hungry to see more of the Big G. So much so that the movie was re-released in a special black and white edition. And not only that, but for the first time in the franchise's 7-decade history, Godzilla finally brought home an Oscar for Best Special Effects. Not bad for a franchise that started with men performing in cheesy rubber monster suits, eh? Indeed, Carl, though personally I can only think of how deserving the Oscar win was after all this time. I know Godzilla himself is pleased with it. Oscars tend to allow actors to increase their asking price. I'd say he's overdue for a raise after the last 70 years. Uh-huh. So, what is the point in bringing this up? I know you want to cut down the length of your videos, so you better get to the point. My point is, Carl, even though Godzilla has technically been out of retirement since 2014, it is only now that he has reached the heights of popularity that I feel he deserves. It's taken a long time, and many failures and false successes, but Toho has finally gotten their act together. And while the Monsterverse might not reach the levels of popularity I feel it deserves, the demand for Toho-produced, homegrown, Japan-flavored Godzilla is on the rise. Hype for Godzilla in this past year hasn't been seen since the late 90s, when TriStar's Godzilla nearly took over the world with its advertising campaign. In a lot of ways, it feels like Godzilla has only just returned, finally coming out of retirement in proper fashion to meet the fanfare that such an event always deserves, and I can't be happier. So, what do you intend to do for your monstrous moment? Well, Carl, this time I'm going to focus on a couple of moments from Godzilla's history that all feature Godzilla returning in some way, fitting with this theme of a return to greatness as I proposed earlier. You sure you want to do 2 moments at once again, kid? It didn't really work out for you last time. Well, I don't see any other option, as the 2 moments I've picked out are so similar that to do them separately would be redundant. The way I see it, I'm showcasing restraint by limiting myself to 2, instead of going every one of these moments across the franchise. There are quite a few of them. Well, okay, just so long as OmniViewer is okay with it. So, how about you start us off? The moment comes from Terror of Mechagodzilla, the last entry in the Showa era from 1975. Wait a minute, I think I know something about this one. You do? Well, yeah, kid. The film came out in the States in 1978, and I caught it at the drive-in. I think I know where you're going with this one. You mind if I take it? Sure, Carl. So, Terror of Mechagodzilla, released here in the States as Terror of Godzilla and heavily censored, is a direct sequel to the previous year's Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla. It follows up almost immediately where the last left off, with a second wave of aliens rebuilding Mechagodzilla to continue the invasion, this time teaming up with a disgruntled scientist and a sea monster called Titanosaurus. The movie is actually around the mystery of finding Titanosaurus and the connection to Dr. Mifune. Meanwhile, we the audience see that Mifune is working with the aliens to repair Mechagodzilla, so the question remains, where is Godzilla? That's right, kid. The only time we actually see Godzilla is brief glimpses during the recap at the start of the film, or depending on the version you get, a series-long clip show that heavily abridges Godzilla's origins and role in the Showa era. It's actually a nice little tribute, considering this ended up being the last entry of the Showa series and thus celebrated the last 20 years of the franchise. But apart from that, Godzilla isn't even mentioned in the movie until 40 minutes in, and isn't shown on screen until the 45-minute mark. Huh. Seems like a tradition, wouldn't you say, kid? We're not going to talk about that movie right now, Carl. All I'll say is, there's a difference between the first installment of a new series and the final entry of a 20-year-long franchise. But yes, Godzilla barely featured in the first half of this movie, but when he is brought in, it is done so in spectacular fashion. Long story short, Dr. Mifune boasts Titanosaurus' superiority to Mechagodzilla and unleashes the monster to attack Tokyo. The alien commander is displeased with this, but unworried as they detect Godzilla closing in on Tokyo Bay looking for a fight. They conclude this will work in their advantage. If Godzilla succeeds in killing Titanosaurus, he'll still be too badly injured to continue fighting, thus will fall easily against Mechagodzilla. We get a lengthy scene of Titanosaurus destroying the city before a moment of quiet. A distinct silhouette appearing in the distance. Titanosaurus is knocked down by a single blast, leading to Godzilla revealing himself in full. Damn, that is a hell of an entrance. Gives me goosebumps even to this day. Damn right it is, and I just love the scowl on Godzilla's face. As the light adjusts to properly reveals him, that face just says, "You walked into the wrong neighborhood, bud," and he's ready to throw down to defend his territory. Indeed, and I love how purposeful Godzilla's appearance here is. You almost feel bad for Titanosaurus, a brainwashed conscriptee being forced to destroy the city, coming face to face with the strongest monster on the planet. But more than that, this is the latter half of the Showa era, which has cemented by this point that Godzilla is the good guy in this film. He's not just here for a fight, he's here to put a rogue monster back in line. Yeah, almost as amusing as how perplexed Godzilla is when Titanosaurus blueballs him and nopes out of the fight. Quite. Still, this scene does showcase what Godzilla has become at this point. He's no longer the problem that humanity has to deal with / survive, he's the solution. In fact, later in the movie, before the climax, some of the human characters make the claim that against both Titanosaurus and Mechagodzilla, Godzilla might lose. He hasn't even shown up yet, and it's already a foredrawn conclusion that he's going to show up to deal with it. They call him a cleaner. He makes problems go away. Right. Well, we focused on Godzilla's return after he'd long since become a hero. Let's switch gears and examine a scene where Godzilla is the villain, the problem that mankind has to deal with and has to scramble for a solution for. The moment in question brings us back to Godzilla vs. Biollante from 1989. Ah yes, Godzilla vs. Little Shop of Horrors, if I recall. But wait, this is the second movie of the second series. Godzilla has already returned in 1985, right? Right you are, Carl. Biollante is the sequel to The Return of Godzilla. However, both in and out of the universe of the film, both movies are separated by about 5 years. The former film ends with Godzilla being trapped inside of the volcanic crater of Mount Mahara, where he stays in a dormant state for 5 years. The conflict of this film is that psychic warnings have alerted those with ESP of the movements causing the eruptions of Mount Mahara. Godzilla is waking up. So now the human cast has to scramble quickly to come up with a contingency plan to kill Godzilla should he escape. This kicks off the commentary on genetic engineering and industrial espionage of the film. Huh. This really is the Jurassic Park of the Godzilla series, like you said. Thank you, Carl. Long story short, the superpowers of the world are wary of Japan using Godzilla's DNA to create bioweapons that could potentially tip the balance of power in the Cold War. Using Godzilla's cells, the scientists have created a bacteria that can feed off of nuclear radiation and radioactive materials. The purpose is to inject Godzilla with this stuff in the hopes that it will eat him from the inside out, but could also be used to completely neutralize a nation's nuclear arsenal, meaning that the nuclear deterrent the Cold War depended on would no longer exist. So naturally, the powers that be attempt to steal the anti-nuclear energy bacteria, and their big plan to do this is to literally ransom all of Japan against the threat of releasing Godzilla from the volcano.
They're holding the entire country to ransom.
That's right, and Godzilla's the hostage.
Although they are ready and willing to meet the demands, the trade-off goes wrong and Mount Mahara is destroyed, freeing Godzilla. Oh yeah, I can see why you picked this scene, kid, and it works really well in contrast with the last one. In that situation, Godzilla showing up was a good thing because he was there to save the day. Right you are, Carl, but in this situation, Godzilla escaping the mountain is a bad thing, because now he's free to menace Japan once again. And I love the forcefulness the film depicts him with as he emerges, indifferent to the explosions taking place all around him as he strides proud from his ruined prison. Heh, cool guys don't look at explosions. Indeed, what works well with both films is the use of music to highlight them. Akira Ikufube's Godzilla theme is used to different effect. His appearance in Terror is slower and deeper and should sound more ominous, but is ultimately meant to showcase his dominance in this situation. You know that no matter what, Titanosaurus is in a lot of trouble now that Godzilla is here. Whereas in Biollante, the theme is fast-paced to signal the urgency the world now fears, since it's the biggest threat to mankind is now once again free to roam the seas. Right you are, Carl. It goes to show the sheer power of Godzilla as he emerges. In the previous film, Godzilla was imprisoned in the volcano out of the belief that only another force of nature stood a chance of stopping him. Now, Godzilla signals that not even nature herself can hold him. He's free, and he's back with a vengeance. He's sure to make Japan feel his wrath, as moments after this, the movie establishes that Godzilla is headed straight for Tokyo. These two scenes are honestly some of the most epic in the franchise. Both showcase Godzilla arriving in the movie and do so similarly, yet distinct enough to convey the contrasting context of the situation. One, a heroic savior riding to the rescue and arriving at just the right moment to protect the world from devastation. The other, a vengeful god, beginning his charge to wreak his vengeance against the mortals who offended him. It is for these reasons and more that I chose these to be my two monstrous moments. Well, that was not bad, kid. I'm glad that you got your groove back. Yeah, maybe just talking about movies or media is what I should focus my channel on. It'll come much easier if it's about Godzilla. I'm glad that you got this out by the Big G's birthday. Speaking of which, isn't there something that you used to do around this time of year involving Godzilla? Oh, you mean that? I haven't done that in years. It got too much for me to handle. Well, why not try bringing it back? After all, you've got a YouTube channel now, and no one says that you have to do it every day. Maybe you could try to do it maybe once a week or something. Well, it'll be tough, but I might as well try. After all, not only is it the 70th anniversary of Godzilla, it's also the 20th anniversary of something else. So, let's give it a shot. For those of you who are still watching, brace yourselves. It's time for the return of G-Month. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've got some work to do.